Hello and welcome to our Gems of the Alshich. We're into an extraordinarily exciting and dramatic Sedra Parsha, the Parsha of Beshalach. It's interesting, this is not the Alshich, but I can't resist telling you because I saw Reb Shamshon Full Hirsch makes an intriguing point on a puzzling question. The Jewish people apparently were on the penultimate level of spiritual or human degradation and spiritual destruction in Egypt, the 49th level. And then they travel to Mount God Sinai, and it only takes them 7 weeks to do so, and they transform themselves and ascend to be in the 49th level of spiritual refinement. How did they achieve such a thing? So he says that the previous parsha, the parsha of Bo, deals with the Exodus. The parsha, which we'll come to next week, is the story of the giving of the Torah. In between there was the story of the Jewish people and the miracles they encountered at the Red Sea and the miraculous manna that fell from heaven and the water that they got to drink, which should have been undrinkable, and all the rest of miracles. And Rav Shamshon Fuller Hirsch says that tells you and points to the fact that they needed to be reassured and witness with their own eyes that the world, the physical world, which seems so real to, well, certainly to me and maybe to you as well, ultimately isn't real. And with that evidence, they were able to move higher and higher and higher to eventually come to Mount Sinai. But at the end of the Sedra, there is, and we'll return to this when we look at the Alshich in next week's Parsha, there is the remarkable war when Amalek comes to fight again against the Jewish people. So that's what we're going to take up the story in this week's Gem of the Alshich. So let me read to you the Hebrew. Vayova Amalek, so Amalek, that's the generally seen in today's terms as being the SS, the quintessential Jew haters, willing to actually suicide bombers, willing to die as long as they're going to take a Jew with them. V'yova Amalek v'yilcham Yisrael, the Amalekites come and fight against the Jewish people, but Refidim in a place called Refidim. V'yoma Moshe al Yehoshua, so Moshe says to Joshua, Bocher lona anoshim v'tzei olechem be'Amalek. You go and get yourself an army together and you go and fight against Amalek. Now, obviously, the question is, why didn't Moshe himself do this? So here's what the Alshich says, and it's very, very deep. He says, and it's a classic idea you can find all the way through Kabbalistic writing and Jewish Kabbalistic writing. No nation falls until its angel, apparently there's like a heavenly United Nations, and each nation has an angel which represents it and personifies, of course personifies is the wrong word, but an angel, angelifies, its whole philosophy, its outlook, its beliefs. No nation falls until that belief system, that spiritual angel, what he represents, what he holds, what he stands for, which excites the affection and loyalty of the people who follow that philosophy. Until it falls, the nation won't fall. That's why he says, incredibly interestingly, that it's essential to send out Yehoshua to fight against these people. There's numerous messages going on here. The first, now the angel of Rome, and of course the Roman world that came to this very day from Rome and its philosophy, that's Europe and then the satellites of Europe, the empires of Europe, North America, Australia, etc., etc. When these spread throughout the world, then they are basically following the philosophy of Rome. Now, when Yaakov fights with the angel of Rome, the angel of his brother Esau, he's able to hit him, damage him in the thigh, and it's actually the top, it's the groin, which is a euphemism for the area of regeneration of the generations. In other words, Yaakov married two sisters. Now, at that time, there was no halakhic bar to it, but there was a sniff of something not being good. When we, the messages, when we, the Jewish people, are flawed, when we're not doing it right, when the Torah and its ideas are not intrinsically who and what we are, that's when we're vulnerable. And Rabbi Dessler, Mixed Million, the fourth volume, right at the beginning, he says a very interesting and scary idea, another Kabbalistic idea. And he says that the angel of Esau, of the anti-Semitic non-Jewish world, gets all of its power, all of its fuel, if you like, from mitzvahs, from the Jewish bits of the Torah and bits of Judaism that we don't do properly. And that it becomes fuel for him to attack the Jewish people. So there's this Jewish idea of mida keneged mida, measure for measure, which, as we've discussed before, King David calls that a kindness, because if you're punished in the same way as you've been doing to other people, then you can figure out what you've done wrong by looking at what's happening to you. I must have done that to other people. That same sort of idea is going on here. If we're being attacked in a certain way, by Esau, of course, it's seen as kingdom hatred for Jews for absolutely no reason whatsoever. In fact, they have to manufacture tracts and forgeries, like the Elders of Zion, etc., to justify the hatred of the Jews. Otherwise, it just becomes totally irrational. Well, it is irrational. We got to camouflage it or cover it with a veil of some sort of rationality. Then if we live in a world where we're being exposed to that, we must be fueling it in the first place. And that's therefore why he sends out Yehoshua. Why didn't Moshe go himself? There's something famous about Yehoshua. The Torah says Yehoshua never left the tent. He never left Moses' side. Of all the Jews in that generation, of the greatest Jews of ever, the greatest generation, there was one Jew who was outstanding, who would become the next leader of the Jewish people, and that was Moshe's greatest disciple, who never left the tent of study, who was the purest adherent, and somebody who would be able to carry on to the next link in the chain of transition of Torah to the Jewish people. He had to go and do this. The message is, you have to make yourself as accusation-proof as possible. He can't hit you in the thigh or wherever else it is that there is a flaw in the Jewish people. When Jewish people go to war, it's not a question of tactics, it's not a question of strategy, it's not a question of weaponry or soldiery. It's a question of your relationship with God. They can only get us if we're weak in a particular part of Judaism and we're fueling them. The message the Alshich says here is this constant reminder: there's always an angel, the angel of Esau, who graduates to become Rome, who graduates to become essentially the world, waiting to get us. But we're invulnerable, invincible, unless we have a chink in our armor. Therefore, you have to have somebody who goes to fight that war, who leads that war, who's able to declare that message and exemplify, personify that message. Work on yourself in your relation to what Judaism has to say and demand of you. And that's the greatest protection the Jewish people can have. Good jobs.